Good morning and a very warm welcome to today's Sustainable Business Network meeting. I'm Wendy Buckley and our session today is on energy efficiency. Does it really work? Just to run through what we've got for you today, we have two excellent speakers. We've got Zoe Booth from Carbon Footprint with the legislation and market updates, and delighted also to have Lisa Howkins from the NFU Energy, who's going to take us through the main subject on energy efficiency for today. There's going to be a longer Q&A session, panel session. Let's make a start then. I'm delighted to welcome back Zoe Booth from Carbon Footprint to present today's update on legislation and market best practice. Over to you, please, Zoe.
So this week, some of you may have seen that we did have Earth Day on Monday. This year's theme was around plastic waste and production as well, actually. And the main theme there was calling for a strong UN treaty on plastic pollution, with the aim to reduce 60% of plastics produced by 2040. I'm not going to go into this too much detail, but I have just popped the link in there for you. There are various toolkits, quizzes, and fact sheets, as well as a number of petitions that you might be interested in on their website, including resources for children as well. So please do take a look at that when you get a chance. Related to that, we do actually have a ban on wet wipes coming, which contain plastic specifically, which was mentioned by the government in the last week or so. The aim behind that is to actually clean up the rivers across the UK a little bit and take the strain off of the sewage system, which currently costs millions of pounds per year, which is a highlight of a recent piece of research that they've done on that. In contrast to this, actually, we've had Rishi Sunak, as you can see there on the left, criticised by Chris Stark recently, I think over the weekend actually, for diluting key green policies and going into a little bit of detail there on the negative impact this will have on our long-term goals as a country, including net zero goals there. For those of you who don't know who Chris Stark is, he is currently the chief executive of the Climate Change Committee, though he is soon to be leaving and will be replaced shortly, actually. You may have also seen a similar vein of thought in headlines in the last couple of weeks. Some kind of negative headline there where it seems that Scotland will be ditching its 2030 climate target, though that's not quite the full story, as they actually had a little bit more of an ambitious goal than England did, which was to have a 75% reduction by 2030. They do still have their net zero aim by 2045, so it's not a complete scrap of their targets there. They just don't think they're going to quite be able to meet the interim targets as a result of a lack of government funding, really. So you might have seen that in the news, but just to clarify there. As is becoming more frequent and more frequent in the news, we've also seen impacts of climate change directly, which have included the flash flooding in Dubai. So that included around 255 millimeters of rainfall in less than 24 hours in certain areas. And just to clarify that the country typically averages around 140 to 200 per year. So that is, significant for them, and they're not really set up to deal with that. You'll also see kind of a bit closer to home in the UK that we have had record payouts by insurers for storm damage across the country there. But in a little bit more positive news, we have also had, you can see that on the right, Project Acorn, which is basically a collaboration between EasyJet and a couple of other partnerships, including Airbus, Rolls-Royce, as well as others there, which showed that EasyJet successfully completed an airside hydrogen refuel trial at Bristol Airport, which is great news for the aviation industry and another positive movement forward for them. We do have some updates from SBTI actually this time. So I've just popped in a quote from them there, which shows that they're going to be looking to include environmental attribute certificates in their rules for kind of acceptable ways to reduce. This comes following a public call for evidence, which was opened in September. And they did originally look at this to cover possibly scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. But after they did their consultation, they're now only considering this for scope 3 emissions. And you can see there that they've mentioned that this is not limited to voluntary carbon market offsetting, but it will include it. So they've also mentioned that they don't intend to be looking at the quality of the offsetting, but they will provide guidelines on how they will address that. Apologies. I've just popped in here as well what they actually mean by environmental attribute certificates for those of you who aren't sure, because it's not immediately obvious in their most recent news. So that covers energy certificates for electricity. And we also see there sustainable aviation fuels, green hydrogen and green gas, which might be something that some of you have been considering for your own offices, and also something that we have seen from a sustainable aviation point of view in recent IATA news, where they released the results from a report which was conducted in conjunction with UCL and a couple of other organisations as well, which is actually the first publication to compare 14 leading net zero roadmaps for aviation. And all of those include SAFs or sustainable aviation fuels to some degree. So it's good news to see that SBTI are also considering this in their guidelines for organisations. The first draft of this is due to be released in July, and they do reiterate that the current guidelines have not changed, but you should see an update to those following that draft release. Similarly, we see the first approvals through the core carbon principles, which is released by the ICVCM. And I've just popped those here on the slide for you. Obviously, you can kind of read those. I won't go through them. And those were released on the 30th of March. So they are still quite new, and they are still taking applications from a variety of organisations that provide carbon offsets to customers. So just to cover that in a little bit more detail, the ICVCM, for those who don't know, is the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, which is a bit of a mouthful. So you can see there the first approved credit certifiers were announced as gold standard, the American Carbon Registration and the Climate Action Reserve. They are processing in batches, so we do know that VCS projects, which is another large portfolio, has been submitted and it is being processed at the moment and being audited, and we expect to see the results there imminently in the next month, really. And as a large supplier, that will be great news for the industry as well. For those of you who are a little bit more interested in this side, perhaps you're looking to offset your emissions and you want to do a little bit of due diligence on your suppliers, there is a link just there which shows you the assessment status and whether these projects have been submitted for approval using the core carbon principles. So please do take a look at that. We've also had a few more updates on ESOS for those of you who need to comply with phase 3. So just a quick reminder here of the qualification date and the compliance deadline. These have not changed in the last few months, but I've just popped them here as a reminder for you. Organisations should be aiming to meet this 5th of June deadline, which was originally 5th of December. If you need to comply and haven't already registered for their platform, it's best to do that as soon as possible to make sure that you can stay on track with your compliance. We had in March the MESOS system, which is managing your energy savings opportunity scheme platform for submission this year. That was open for registration, so that registration is live now. We were supposed to see the submission platform open this week as well, or the submission part of that Mesos system open, but that has actually been delayed again. It is still in its final test stages, but they are still stating the end of April for submission opening. So we should see that next week. Otherwise, we expect that they will release a further deadline on that. We've got more platform updates this year from CDP for those of you who need to submit your emissions here. So we have a new portal from them, which is now open for those who need to request evidence from your suppliers. The questionnaire will become available next week to look at, and the portal will open for disclosures in May as well, with the deadline being in September this year, which for those of you who have done this before, you'll notice this is a little bit later than the usual July deadline. For 2024, they've got a couple of new things as well. So they've actually streamlined the submission platform to make this easier for people. The aim here is that it'll be easier to disclose, track progress, and access data and disclosure information. The platform should have more self-service functionality, and we expect to see cross-colleague collaboration as well to make submission as smooth as possible. There is a variety of videos on their website for both requesters and disclosures under the new platform, which you can take a look at. There'll be a little link at the end of these slides for you to look at there. And you also see there'll be a streamlined SME questionnaire, which will align with the full questionnaire, but there'll be fewer data points, simplified questions, and an enhanced guidance just to make that a little bit easier for you. For those of you who might have taken part in the pilot version last year, this will replace that as the full SME version. As always, we have a little bit of coverage on fines here. So over the past year, you may have seen lots of news around water companies with a lot of complaints actually that the Environment Agency aren't acting fast enough. We know that there are large ongoing investigations with new technology to monitor leaks. And here we do see the evidence of that coming into light with a case against Southwest Water, where you can see there a large amount of evidence was available to be submitted by the Environment Agency. There is an adjournment on that until July, whilst they're kind of looking into that evidence, and hopefully we should see some kind of fines and prosecution come out of that. This comes at the same time as the government released their whistleblowing platform, which I think went live on the 26th of March, which will make it easier for internal water company whistleblowers to report concerns. The aim of this being that the Environment Agency can then investigate much more quickly into these leaks that we see and illegal discharges. So these findings that come from the whistleblowing portal will be able to be supporting enforcement action against companies, and that can include unlimited fines and criminal prosecution there. We've also had some large prosecution against a number of companies and individuals for illegal waste dumping. So you can see here there were kind of 5 individual personal convictions against some individuals working for VWJ Earth Moving Limited, with some large fines there as well, including custodial sentences there for all 5 people involved actually, as well as some unpaid kind of community service work. So that's quite a large prosecution there in the kind of waste sector. We also had Richmond Perfume Company sanctioned for failure to comply with packaging waste legislation there. So that was for apologies, not registering their account with the Environment Agency in the correct way, and they were ordered to use the money that they would have paid for their registration to contribute this to Surrey Wildlife Trust to improve habitats there, as well as covering costs for the Environment Agency investigation. As normal, we've popped in the links here for you to go and have a look in your own time at any more of those stories. And of course, if you do want to ask any further questions, my contact details are here for you, and I'm happy for you to reach out.
Great. Thank you so much, Zoe. That's really interesting, actually. And I think it's always good, in some senses, to see that the custodial sentences are being issued for those transgressions, actually. And it's not just a case of some money that you could arguably say for the bigger companies they have in their budgets to pay for those types of problems. So yeah, if you do have a question for Zoe, please pop it in the chat right now. I do have actually a couple of things that I've been private messaged on whilst you've been speaking. So I'm actually going to read this one out now. We haven't started ESOS yet. What would you suggest we do? It's a little bit late in the day there, but good that you're doing it. Zoe, what would be your recommendation there to our delegate on we haven't started yet?
Yeah, so as Wendy mentioned there, it's a little bit later in the day than we'd like, but it's not too late to take action. So the best thing to do is to make sure that you are registered on the portal as soon as possible, and definitely before that 5th of June deadline there. There is the option for those who are late to be able to submit by August, but you do need to make sure that you are on the registration portal before that at the 5th of June deadline. And it's best as well that you reach out to the Environment Agency to let them know that you are going to be delayed, and start taking this process as soon as possible, really.
I think there's a quite prominent on their website, there is a link to contact them, an email link on there, and I think they're actually quite responsive. When we've had questions about particular elements of ESOS, they've been quite responsive. I think, you know, you're right there. If you're concerned, let them know. And I think in previous phases they've been quite lenient in providing perhaps a little bit more time for you, but obviously they'll want to know exactly why you're starting late. So yeah, just no surprises really for the EA. I think that's what is key there. We'll move on now to our next presenter, and delighted to have Lisa Halkins from NFU Energy to join us today. Lisa, over to you, please.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Wendy, and yeah, thank you for allowing us to speak today. Hopefully about a subject that will give everybody a little bit of food for thought on how to best look at energy efficiency measures on site. We'll also talk about a little bit about some both incentives and areas that you could sort of benefit financially from too. So just hopefully you can see my screen okay. I'm also joined by my colleague Roger Stones. He's going to join us in the panel later for any questions that you have. Roger is our technical consultancy lead for the organisation. He's also an ESOS lead assessor. So if you do have any questions, if you haven't started the ESOS process yet, then Roger's your man. So just putting that out there to start with. So a little bit about who we are. So NFU Energy are owned outright by the NFU, the National Farmers Union. As an organisation, we've been running for over 30 years now, and for the past 6, we've been owned by the NFU. And we specialise in essentially all things energy, and that's from energy contracts through to consultancy, compliance measures, renewable energy solutions, and energy strategy. We help to support about 48,000 NFU members, so about 80% of our business sits sort of very firmly within farming and agriculture. However, we also work with organisations outside of farming and agriculture, in particular those that are linked to farm to fork. So that could be anything from process, manufacturing, logistics, education, universities, so lots of different areas. So today we are going to share some best practice suggestions that we hope can support your business in terms of sustainability, efficiency, and I think most importantly for everybody, cost savings. We'll talk through areas like energy volatility and how to get the best competitive prices and ensure that your standing charges are accurate. Also how to better understand energy efficiency levels on site, how to move away from the reliance on fossil fuels, and the compliance measures out there that could support your business further. Now, the energy market has been incredibly turbulent over the past 3 to 4 years. We've seen some of the lowest prices at the start of lockdown through COVID, through to the most expensive prices in September, October 2022. Thankfully, we're seeing more of a stable situation right now. However, we are still seeing prices pulled by the suppliers recently. The situation between Iran and Israel has definitely affected prices, along with a maintenance shutdown recently with EDF sites in Scotland. So my advice to you when it comes to the energy market is stay informed. NFU Energy have a free weekly energy bulletin available to anybody that registers. It will give you up-to-date market intelligence and help you to understand when the best time to lock your prices is. NFU Energy also have an energy brokerage that can help. However, there are lots of good brokers out there, and it is something that we do recommend. It gives you the opportunity to look at lots and lots of different suppliers and ensuring that you've got the best possible price for you. It can fluctuate very quickly, so if you can use a brokerage that can help reduce that time to do that research, then that's a great thing. Advice on that is ensure they're transparent. There are small and micro business requirements, Ofgem requirements, that mean that all brokers must be very, very open when it comes to commission payments. So ensure that this is happening, ensure you know exactly the breakdown of the costs. From a energy contracts point of view, we're also seeing a lot of changes to standing charges recently, and we really advise that you look and review what your standing charges are, what band you're in. It's called TCR banding, which is targeted charging review. And if you're put in the wrong band for any reason, if the supplier envisages that you're going to use more than your actual demand is, then you may be in a band higher than you should be, and therefore you could be paying a lot more than you should be as well. Finally, when it comes to energy contracts, if you're required to demonstrate green credentials as part of any agreement within the supply chain, for example, this is a really good place to start. If you're yet to embark on renewables or unable to for geographical reasons, for planning reasons, you might want to look at green contract options. We're seeing green contract options come to the same, so they're very, very similar price to fossil fuel now. So definitely worth looking at that. Just be mindful, and we've seen this recently in the dairy sector, where requirements for green energy contracts support a better price for milk. However, this particular business doesn't class nuclear as green energy. So when you're looking at your supply agreements, just a tip is just check whether or not nuclear is classed as green energy. So a little bit of information on energy contracts there. One of the biggest areas that we advise people on is measurement and the power of data. And you hear statements like you can't manage what you don't measure banded round very, very often. Understanding the breakdown of data, understanding the what's going on site, the how, what, where and when is is really, really important. And we can start that, keeping with the contracts, we can start that with bills. Check your bills against your usage. And if you are using sub-metering, if you're monitoring what's happening on site, it's very simple to be able to check that your bills are accurate. And it's surprising in business how many bills are accurate. It's why there's bill validation software out there. So it's best understanding the breakdown of bills to ensure that all of those components are covered and they match your energy usage. But we also advise that you look at how you're using your energy, where you're using your energy, pinpoint energy usage and trends. By using sub-metering, by monitoring what's happening on site in specific areas, you're able to easily spot anomalies. So, for example, if you look at a school, for example, and you've got an energy spike at 2 o'clock in the morning, the likelihood is there's nobody there, and you've got a boiler perhaps firing up inaccurately at the wrong time. Ensuring that these changes are made quickly when spotted can reduce your energy spend quite significantly. It can spot inefficiencies. I've worked with large football stadiums where it's obviously everything happens at the weekend and very, very little happens within the week. But it's amazing if there's any faults. So we've seen faults within toilets and men's urinals where water was constantly flowing because the automatic flush systems didn't work properly, and therefore you've got a huge water usage there. So you can really spot hidden inefficiencies and look at where you can improve that very quickly. Another thing that monitoring and data collection can do is help with schemes like ESOS, for example, where you're required to demonstrate what's happening on site, where you're using your energy, how much energy you're consuming. Also, if you comply or you're doing your SECR reporting alongside ESOS, it makes collecting that data so much more efficient, so much easier. And if you're using a consultancy to manage that on your behalf, and the monitoring and the metering and the measurement is already there, you're going to bring down the cost of the services required, because consultants like us don't have to go out to site and find all this information. You've already got that generating, you've already got that happening. It also, anybody that benefits from the renewable heat incentive, it will help with the periodic data submissions that are required. So relatively cost effective for monitoring systems. You can, I mean, it starts from the sublime to the ridiculous, really. You can have small data loggers which are very easily installed, and that can collect data on certain sites. That will bring it into typically either by Wi-Fi. You can collect that data, pull that data into a software package, and you can report on what's happening and when. So a really, really good way of monitoring what's happening on site, reviewing, looking at anomalies, and hopefully fixing them quickly to help make savings. I'm not going to talk lots about renewables today. I think there's lots and lots of renewable energy solutions out there. There's lots and lots of renewable energy installers out there. And we have a renewables team ourselves, and it's something that we back and we very much support. But what I'd like to talk about is where to start. If you haven't installed renewables on site yet, if it's something that you're looking into, then I would really recommend you start with an energy audit, looking at a consultancy that works for your business, to look at what's happening on site, and going back to that monitoring and metering and measuring what's happening on site and when. They can help you draw up a very, very detailed energy plan. They can look at the feasibility of what's right for you. It might be that you're looking at heat pumps at the moment, but actually the cost to run those heat pumps due to the energy prices might not be 100% right if you're not doing that in conjunction with solar, for example. It could be that wind turbines would be ideal for your site, but planning is going to be an issue. And I think one of the most important things with an energy audit, if they can spot very quick wins, if they can spot very cheap wins, if you have that done and you make those changes before you have a solar installer come on site, the likelihood is you're going to need less solar to power your business. And therefore you're reducing the investment that you need to make in solar because you're already efficient and you're already running efficiency measures on site. So there are lots and lots of very good energy consultants out there, but the key thing is to ensure that they're providing you with this really detailed report that supports your energy strategy. It gives you that detail of, right, this is what good looks like, this is how you compare, this is where all your energy is being consumed, these are some inefficiencies. Look at your machinery. Is there any efficiencies that can be made to that machinery, to that process, that can actually help reduce energy consumption on site? And there are a number of quick wins that you can look at. So things like insulation and sealing air leaks. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Actually, I've been on site with Roger previously at with a potato farmer, and literally some tarpaulin to help with airflow and sealing air leaks will bring the cold that's being produced to store back into the produce. So it can really help with keeping or driving down chilling costs, bringing the product to optimum temperature quicker, and really help reduce the cost needed to use chillers on site. So doors and docking systems, make curtains, things like that, they make a big difference in farming and agriculture, but also the process industry and manufacturing, something that's really worth looking at. LED lighting, if you haven't looked at LED lighting, there's huge potential savings there. They produce less heat, so you could potentially bring down your air conditioning bills in the summer, and you're looking at saving anything up to 80% compared to conventional bulbs. Now, surprisingly, there's a huge amount of people that have transferred over to LED lighting now, but there's still a lot that haven't, so definitely one to look at. The next one, as mentioned when we talked about energy efficiency, is your appliances and your HVAC systems, your heating and cooling systems. If they're not kept up to date, if they're not maintained, they might not be working efficiently for you. So it's definitely worth looking at your systems, what's in place at the moment, their age, whether they need servicing, whether they need replacing. And that regular maintenance will not only help the longevity of the equipment itself, but cleaning filters, checking for leaks will help, and help with the longevity, but also with the cost to run as well. I think one of the big things that can help as well, and this may sound like a little bit of common sense, but it's your teams, it's the people within your organisation, it's those behavioural changes. It's educating people to ensure that they're turning their lights off. If you've got office space and people are leaving monitors on at night, it's making sure that you're reminding people, or setting energy efficiency specialists within the business that before they leave is they check that monitors are all switched off. It's these tiny little changes, but over a course of a year can make a significant impact on the business. Touching on renewable energy sources definitely can help and support, and potentially be a source of income as well. So if you're generating more than you need, there's the opportunity to sell back to the grid through either PPAs or SEG agreements that are now available. And then the next thing that I would recommend is look at the government incentives out there, look at rebate schemes that are out there. It's very difficult to do this alone. It's very costly to do this alone. So if there are grants available, if there is something available out there to help support you with this, I urge you to do your research and look at what's out there. Which leads in nicely to some of the government grants initiatives that could be available for you. And the first one is the Climate Change Agreement, the CCA scheme. Now, as an organisation, we run the CCA scheme on behalf of the NFU for the horticulture sector, pig and poultry. However, this is across multiple different industries. And it requires you to report against your energy use and your emissions. And it's been recently extended to 2025. So definitely something worth looking at. If you're essentially you are paid a reduced rate of your CCL tax by making these changes. So if you are not registered to a scheme, have a look to see whether it's relevant to your industry and look to see whether you could benefit from the scheme. It will help you with your company goals, it will help you with your carbon footprint reduction and help you with sustainability. Just to demonstrate, and this is just some redacted costs from one of our members within the horticulture sector that we're working with at the moment. And just to see the savings that this particular member has made, this makes a huge difference for their business. It's a lot of money. So it's definitely something worth looking at. It could significantly benefit you. The next one is the Combined Heat and Power Quality Assurance, so CHPQA. It's a government scheme designed to promote the use of combined heat and power systems. So if you are, it's to encourage the deployment of CHP technology to improve energy efficiency, helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions by utilising the waste heat. So again, if this is relevant to your organisation and you're not registered to the scheme, then this is something that that we would recommend that you look at. Next one is the Renewable Heat Incentive. Many of you may already be benefiting from RHI. Now, the scheme, unfortunately, is closed to new applicants. However, you can still buy RHI accredited boilers, so you can still benefit from the scheme. And there are a number of people out there that sell and buy RHI accredited boilers. It would need a transfer of ownership. So if you're purchasing it, you would need to get that registered, get that transfer of ownership done, and that means that you can then benefit from those RHI payments. It's worth noting as well that Ofgem have started to audit this system, so you just check, and again going back to that data, making sure that you're doing your periodic data submissions, you're making sure that everything is up to date. You will need to get those meters recalibrated after 10 years. And this is something that is being, actually the audits themselves, I believe, are being tendered for at the moment. So these audits do happen in order to ensure that you're doing what's required to receive your RHI payments. The next offering is actually a grant, and that's the IETF, the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund, relevant to all of the sectors that are listed here. And it's to help support energy efficiency and decarbonisation studies within the areas listed. It's opened so in spring this year. The competition window opened. Earlier on this year. It's closing today, but there are different timelines, so there might be some changes here. Essentially, it's to look at feasibility and engineering studies. It's to look at deployment projects that are going to deliver energy efficiency on site. So going back to those audits, going back to those feasibility studies, if you are in these sectors, this fund can potentially help with that, looking at innovation and looking at significant decarbonisation projects on site. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of a taster of just some quick wins for your businesses. I know I've sort of talked to you relentlessly for a while now, so I genuinely hope it was of interest to you. Just to summarise, when you are looking at energy reduction, at energy efficiency, decarbonisation, it's first of all, understand your energy footprint. So look at your measurements, look at what's happening, look at energy audits, whether they'll be right for you, to give you that detailed proof of what you need to do next. A final point with these reports, we've seen evidence where people have been able to take these feasibility studies, take these audits to banks in order to say, look, these are the green projects that I want to run on site. Here's the evidence, and it's helped them secure the funding that they've needed to be able to move forward with those projects. Always look at whether the renewable technology is right for you. There'll be a lot of installers out there that will say, yep, we can do this, we can do that, but just do your own research first. Do your feasibility studying first of all. Make sure it's right for you. You want to get the maximum efficiency out of it. And by generating your own, you're obviously removing that reliance from fossil fuels. You're significantly reducing your energy bills. You're becoming a lot more self-sufficient. So if for any reason those energy prices spike up to what they did in 2022, you're protected and you're covered. And you hopefully that will help with future-proofing your organisation. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, both myself and Roger are more than happy to answer them either next or during the panel. But Wendy, back to you.
Lisa, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And gosh, there's so much to digest in what you've just presented there. We've had a couple of comments and questions actually in. Thank you to Anna for mentoring, I think it was the PowerMon. It was for monitoring energy use. Perhaps, I think, Anna, you're saying there is a little bit old school. Used it a while ago to look at consumption from computers when they were not attended. And perhaps with, we're all now using SSDs and cloud storage, that's less of an issue, but I'm sure there's still some great ways to easily and cheaply monitor the energy we're using. So I think there's more of a comment there from Anna. Lisa, unless do you have anything more to say on cheap ways to monitor, easy, quick ways to monitor what power is being used when you wish it not to be?
So you can get little, and Roger can perhaps help me out here, but you can work with little, just an example, little Zigbee devices, little data collection devices, very easy to install, very cost effective, anything from say 300 to 600 pounds. They're not huge. You might get a small monthly charge if you're using a software solution with it to pull that data into a gateway device so that you can see everything as a whole. But there's ones that have just little clamps on that can very quickly and efficiently be clamped on temporarily, just if you wanted to do that as a trial before you invest in anything that's more sort of hardwired. There's companies out there that can help with that and look at that temporary, and then you can take a step back and say, right, okay, this was really useful because we can spot this, or actually this doesn't give us the information we need, so therefore thankfully we've only rented it for 3 months and therefore we don't have to look at any significant costs moving forward.
Great. Okay. Another question on RGGOs and biomethane and the whole opportunity around that. If I can ask you, Lisa, about
yes. So
that.
So REGOs and RGGOs. So being able to, so now I'm going to, off the top of my head, so it's the renewable energy generation origin and renewable gas generation origin. Now, a number of years ago, be honest, they weren't particularly, to sell them, you wouldn't get a huge amount of money for them. We are seeing the market for REGOs and RGGOs increasing quite significantly. It's something that we've been looking into ourselves as an organisation. So it is a potential income opportunity. So if you're generating through renewables or generating green gas, generating green electricity, this is it's a great potential income earner for businesses. Just a couple of pointers on that. Check your energy contracts. We've got a number of contracts, very, very large contracts, where the supplier actually requires the REGOs to be sent back to them. And not to, so you couldn't be able to sell them on your own because it's built into supplier contract. So always check your supplier contract to make sure that the fine print doesn't state that. However, if that's all okay, work with a broker that can find the best pricing for you, can do those trades for you. We'll get in contact and say, right, cost of REGOs, cost of RGGOs are at this at the moment, and therefore do you want to sell? Also remember, and I know this sounds like common sense, but we've also had a few instances where people have sold their REGOs and then been surprised that the supply chain aren't classing them as green because they have that renewable, so they are generating renewable energy, but by selling that renewable energy or sort of origin, they're passing it on. So it's no longer sat with them. So you can't double up.
No double counting.
Absolutely. So just be, and
so
I know that
important.
sounds like common sense, but we've had a few organisations that have sold off their REGOs, and then when they've done their green energy reporting for their suppliers, they've double counted, and you can get in trouble for that.
Oh yes, that's a good watch out, isn't it? There. Okay, we have another question on. Sorry, my page has just jumped up a little bit. A situation for residential blocks of flat for landlords. Does the TCR banding apply to the rest as well?
It's a very good question, and I do not know. From a business point of view, it does. From a domestic point of view, I don't know. However, Wendy, if you're happy to pass me the details and they're happy for me to get in touch with them, I can go away and find out.
We can post the answer to that one a little bit later, by all means. Thank you so much for the questioning on that. Gosh, we're getting lots of questions here. Let's have a look at the next one. I'm going to just read this straight out. Excuse me. I understand REGOs can be used against Scope 2 electricity to make it carbon neutral, but RGGOs cannot be used against Scope 1 under the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. I know the Greenhouse Gas Protocol was consulting on this. I wondered if you knew if any changes had been made. That's a great question, actually. I think I'm looking over at Zoe Booth as well, because I know that we face this question a lot in what we're doing in analysis. So ladies, if you both want to contribute in here, that would be great. And we will very quickly get on to the main survey results and the panel discussion. But let's see if we can answer this between the two of you, please.
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, and Lisa, please do correct me if you've got any more up-to-date information, but they are still consulting on this or looking at the results. I know that the beginning of April this year, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol released their kind of results of their consultation survey regarding market-based accounting, but as far as I'm aware at this point that still only covers the scope 2. So we should see the results of the consultations come out kind of within the next 3 to 6 months, I'd hope, particularly as the newest guidance is still due to be released in 2025, so hopefully that will be in the works still. Not sure if you have anything to add there,
I have
Lisa.
nothing to add there. No, so no, that's exactly where we're sat at the moment.
Great, great. There is another question coming in there, which is about tenanted accommodation, which actually sits really nicely within our panel discussions. So I'm going to share my screen again so I can see the numbers are still going up. Keep voting. It is live. So let's have a look at what you told us. And for the panel discussion, we're very lucky today. We've got Roger Stones from NFU Energy also joining us right now. If you want to give us a wave or say hi, Roger, please do. And also delighted we've got John Buckley, who is heading up the ESOS programme here at Carbon Footprint. So we got lots of folks on, and let's see what we make of the results. Gosh, it's so exciting when you see this changing just as you go here. Right. Let's have a little look. Those of you that have already done some retrofit technologies to your buildings, look at this, guys. I know those of you joining the SBN, obviously here because you are committed to all of this. This is a really amazing result to see so many doing things. Gosh, I wish it were only that true across all ESOS programs, right? Any comments there? That the panel wants to make? It's good, isn't it?
No, it's good. Yeah, it's good.
Great. I think there's a bit more detail in here
Let's have a look at that.
of the technologies that you have implemented. What things have you done? Oh, it's still changing, guys. Well, this is really good. And any surprises there? Look at lighting.
No, it's kind of the obvious stuff, isn't it? The lighting is the best one to do. Well, one of the best ones to do. It's quite cheap and easy to do. So it's good to see that most people have done that. Solar, that's quite good, isn't it? Quite a few people have gone for the solar as well as the second most popular thing. Nobody has hit solar PV batteries though yet, which, to be honest, doesn't surprise me too much, because in a business you obviously usually use quite a lot of energy and often more energy than you can generate more. So you often use more energy than you can generate on the roof space that you've got on the building. So to have a battery isn't going to be that useful or always in an office type environment or an industrial type environment. So it doesn't surprise me too much that there's not too many batteries. Double glazing. Oh, people have gone for double glazing. Double glazing surprises me a little bit that that's so high, because the payback period on that is quite low, although it's not an obvious thing to do. And you think, you're losing obviously a lot of heat energy through the windows. It will obviously save energy, but the payback period is probably in the sort of 20-year time frame, rather than with solar, you're probably 5 to 8 years, and LED lighting probably within a year payback, depending on what you're changing to. So yeah, some interesting things there. HVAC upgrades is good. Yeah, it's good.
Roger, is there anything that surprises you, that stands out in what you can see on that graph, albeit from our small sample here today? Just your observations, please.
The LED lighting is, that's not surprising, because we work with farms and let's call them, they sort of get grouped into a sort of a semi-industrial process. Our energy audits show that everybody wants to change light bulbs. As soon as they hear about energy efficiency, they want to change light bulbs, but actually lighting, it depending on the situation, of course, but most of what we find is that lighting only ever accounts for less than about, just going to account for less than 5% of the total energy use. So, because it's so visible, it's the rock star. Everybody sees the lights, and they put LEDs in, and now they think they're saving energy. So they and they do save energy. And if you've got a big like a shopping mall or a office that's only used, so offices we find are basically lighting and HVAC, but HVAC is the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning is 80-90% of your energy. So yes, lights are very good, and you must do them, but it's not the low-hanging fruit that that everybody thinks it is.
Yes, yes, and you've led me really nicely on. I think you know what I'm going to say next. That insulation isn't the rock star of the piece at all, is the hidden thing in the walls and in the, you know, in our lofts that we don't see. Does this surprise you here, what we're seeing? Are we failing to insulate? I know really within NFU's sort of situation, perhaps with farm buildings, that might be slightly different for
insulation
our friends who are in office-based accommodation and other things like that. Perhaps
insulation is vital. You want to really focus on when, especially with the industry, if you're looking at refrigeration for the big pack houses and the refrigeration units, so that people are bringing in a lot of their product, they refrigerate, they're keeping potatoes and grains and that in really big storehouses that need to be refrigerated or kept warm or whatever. So refrigeration is vital. If you're looking in a commercial situation, residential, you definitely want to be looking at insulation. And like you say, because it's invisible, you can't see it. But it definitely makes a big difference. I think sometimes people go a little bit overboard with insulation and they sort of tend to over-engineer on some level. But it definitely, you must remember, all heat goes through the ceiling, goes through the roof. So what you want, if you're going to be prioritizing anything, insulate your ceiling, insulate your roof, and do a good job of that. And then your double glazing is definitely something that you want to look at, but rightfully so. It's not the cheapest, and sometimes retrofitting double glazing is a real mission, but it can be. But you know what? Pay now, play later. So if you do it, you just bite the bullet and do it, and then your electricity bills will go down. But you're looking at about, I can't remember the sort of ratios. So more heat will go out the roof, less out the windows, and and a lot less out the floor. But if you can, doors, double doors, or what are those things called? What's it? Air curtains, yeah, that sort of thing. You want to keep an eye on that. What we also find with big shopping centres and these buildings with these lovely big glass places that you see down near London and down south and whatever, really fancy looking glass structures, which are really nice. But what they're doing is they're basically turning the building into a giant greenhouse. And then all that happens is it's very beautiful and lots of nice light, but actually you're pumping a lot of energy from the sun into your building, and then the air conditioner actually has to do to work against that glass. So if you're going to be doing fancy glass stuff, yes, double or triple glaze it on the roof or in the front or wherever it is. If it's on a south-facing side of a building, be careful about too much glass. Although it's very nice, it does it creates a lot. It's what sort of tertiary or secondary heating issues inside the building. So yeah, think about that.
Unintended consequences indeed. I'll go back to John Buckley actually and just ask really on the insulation there. It does seem to me that maybe I get marketed a lot more about solar than I do about insulation, and that should be more visible to me. Just from what you've seen from ESOS program, what's the payback times that people are getting on insulation? Just to put that in perspective.
Well, that has put me on the spot, hasn't it? Thanks for that. Insulation, I think usually within a couple of years, you're probably going to get payback really on insulation. It certainly depends on the amount that you've got. There's kind of the law of diminishing returns. So if you've already got some insulation in the loft and then you put a little bit more in, it's it's going to make a little bit of difference, but it's not going to give you a massive payback. But if you've got no insulation there at the moment and you put some insulation in, then it's probably going to pay for itself quite quickly. So it depends on what the starting position is. What we've found with ESOS is that it's not always as easy as just deciding you're going to put insulation in, because when it comes to real world stuff and businesses, it depends a little bit on the amount of control the business has in the building. So, most companies will be renting space in a building or leasing the building, and they may not be able to, go and change lots of hardware, the HVAC system, or put insulation in the roof. So then, or walls. Then you've got to sort of think about, what's easy and practical for the actual user of that building to be able to do. Obviously, you can talk to the landlord and see if you can convince them to do it, which you might have some success with, but not always. So it's a little bit down to the level of your control. And I think what we've learned through ESOS, when we've done literally hundreds of on-site audits over the last couple of years, is that it's often the simple things and the the no cost things that make the biggest difference. So it's probably worth throwing that point in. As Roger rightly said, it's the heating and cooling of buildings, especially office buildings, that takes most of the energy. Lighting, yeah, it's not a big percentage, but it has a quick payback if you change to LEDs. So if you want to make the biggest energy savings, it's around heating and cooling, the HVAC system. And often the easiest thing to do is just look at the settings and the controls that you've got. If you've got the HVAC system being turned on at 7 o'clock in the morning for heating and cooling and going off at 8 o'clock at night, but people only come into the building typically from 9 o'clock till 5 p.m., then there's a whole heap of time that you could sort of start squashing in on to sort of cut down the amount of time that you're keeping that building at temperature for. And then the other thing is to look at, it depends on how good the controls are in the building, and that's another thing that you can maybe retrofit relatively easily, your control systems. But there's what we call a dead band in the middle of the heating and cooling area, and sort of trying to widen that dead band a little bit so that, heating only comes on if the temperature drops below, say, 19 degrees, and the air conditioning only comes on if the temperature goes above 23 degrees or something like that, 22 degrees. So you've got a bigger dead band area, which then will save quite a lot of energy. So it's the timings, dead band, and remember, buildings take a while to cool down as well, or change temperature. So even if people go, if everybody leaves the office, say at 6 p.m., you could potentially turn the heating and cooling settings off at an earlier time, say 5 p.m. Just let it slowly, change, and most people at the end of the day won't notice. So there's little tips like that, and those, which is just turning the dials, it doesn't cost anything really. It can probably save a big chunk of your heating and cooling costs without doing too much at all.
Great. I think we'll move on to the next question. I think you've actually anticipated what was in a question earlier about the challenges for people in landlorded accommodation. So thank you very much for that. Let's move on to our next question. We were asking, if you did retrofit work, how did you feel the cost savings came out actually? And this is looking pretty good actually. I did worry whether we'd see people report in real life situations much longer payback times than you see on the labels, if I can put it that way. Let's go to Lisa. Do those numbers surprise you?
No, I think I'd love to go back to those 6 in the next couple of years' time and see how things are progressing there. I think it really does depend on what has been implemented as well. So it's great to see that that out of the I think 15, that there's a good number that are all paying back within a 5-year period. I think that's quite good. That aligns with solar installations, with heat pumps, with some turbines, and other practices. So that's positive to see.
I think a lot of these, let's remember from the top, obviously we had a lot of LED lighting going in, so I'd expect that to be sort of within the 2 years or so there. So that is really good to see. Okay, I'm not sure whether we'll be able to interrogate the next question live here, because I need to go into some Excel spreadsheets, which might not be great to try out live. If you hadn't installed anything, why not? A little bit of a mixed bag here. We can all see what that is. I think we've dealt with the issue on landlords. I would like to ask the question actually on property restrictions from a perspective of being, say, in a grade 2 listed building. And I know there's quite a few people who are on the call that will be in that kind of position. So if there are any kind of restrictions, covenants and things like that, what do we suggest there are the things to do? Who wants to take that? I'm
You
just
got no
wondering if
takers.
Oh, yeah, go ahead,
No,
John.
I was just going to say you've got no takers. I know it's hard, isn't it, when
Yeah,
there's restrictions on the building, and
yeah,
obviously if you want to do some big things like put solar on the roof, but you're restricted because you can't because of various local rules on what you can do, or it's hard. But I'd go back to kind of what I was saying a little bit earlier, that sometimes the biggest wins can come with just changing the way you use the building, and tweaking things here and there. And Lisa talked about behavioural change and getting staff involved and bought into it, and getting if you've got a grade 2 listed building, it doesn't stop people turning the lights off, does it? It doesn't stop people turning things off when they're not there. It doesn't stop you from turning the heating off at the weekends if nobody's around, etc. So there's a lot of things that you can still do. You obviously have some restrictions, and you've got to kind of work with it.
great.
What I can say is that we work with a company called, part of the NFU is a company called CT Planning. CT Planning looks at some of this type of thing. So we've had them getting permission to install wind turbines into national parks and such like, because of it doesn't always work, but sometimes it's beneficial to the community or to the people that are putting it up. And one thing that you do want to be aware of is that most buildings, depending on local laws, most buildings you can put solar panels on the roof. You don't really need permission to do that. In some cases you will, but in most cases you don't need to get permission for a PV on an existing roof. However, there is a thing called an LDC, a legal development certificate. So if you don't need permission, it's a good idea to get that LDC, I think it's legalized, or it doesn't matter, LDC, some certificate, because what happens is you keep that in your back pocket somewhere, and if you want to sell the building and the bank wants to see that, you've got it. Or if they change the rules later on, then you've got that legal development certificate, and it's not too expensive to get that, so that you've just sort of belts and braces for putting a solar panel on your roof.
I think actually, and if there's someone who knows the words better than me, please put it in the chat. PV is under what they call permitted developments. So the planning office actually doesn't want to hear from you, and you can get this certificate of legal development there, if you like. But that's all under permitted developments, which is a really positive thing. Great. Okay, let's move on then to our next question. Have you looked down at cutting down your actual energy use in your buildings and processes? That's great, actually. Yes, really good. And if you have imposed those restrictions, what did you do? And this is what the world looks like. And actually, the winner there is occupancy sensors for lighting. Very interesting. Slightly truncated on here. Reduced temperature on thermostat is your top one, and allowed an increase in, I'm sure this is going to be the server room temperature. Gosh, that's very low.
Oh yeah.
Right.
No, that's an obvious one actually. We've done, like I say, we've done hundreds of these ESOS energy audits over the last couple of years for this round of ESOS, and one of the things that we do find very common is that companies tend to overcool their server rooms. Typically, you'll go into a server room and it's 18 degrees, and the other rooms are quite kind of nice and cozy to walk into, and then you suddenly feel a bit chilly when you walk into the server room. And modern IT equipment, it can easily operate at much higher temperatures than that. So typically one of the easiest recommendations is just to increase the temperature of the server room to about 23 degrees, and we find that would work pretty well. The amount of saving obviously depends on the size of number of servers and stuff, so it might only be, you might save £100 by just turning the dial of the temperature in that room Or, you know, if you've got a really big server room, it can run into many thousands of pounds. So, you know, just for changing that setting is an easy thing to do. So well worth looking at. And the other thing with server rooms is that we're finding that, you know, more and more people are putting their servers into the cloud. So you can sort of potentially get rid of your server room as well. Depends what sorts of things that you do. And certainly in our company, we got rid of our servers ages ago, and it's all kind of cloud-based now, which obviously puts the problem. It doesn't completely get rid of the problem. It puts it somewhere else, sort of in our scope 3 emissions, if you like, but in an area where others are looking after it, and probably in a much more efficient way than we can do as one single server in a single little room.
Great. Roger and Lisa, anything else in there surprise you?
The transport, John will probably agree with me, but we're now in an ESOS phase, and for me, transport is the bane of my existence at the moment because it's like, you know, I'm actually on strong medication to deal with my nervous twitch. But anyway, transport, people spend a lot more. There's a lot more energy going into transport than you think. Especially if you've got reps or people out on the road and you're doing that. If you're sort of just office based and you're doing admin, obviously that's very different. But what we found is that an ESOS is going to be coming a little bit tougher in the next phase 3, 4, 5. They're going to be looking at actual accountability. They're going to be asking you what have you actually saved, and show us. They want evidence of you actually saving energy. And what we are finding is that you only need to record 3 things for your transport. You need to report the car size. In other words, the engine size, is it small, medium, large, 1600, diesel, petrol, whatever. You need to link the miles with that, the business miles, and then the actual liters of. So please, to help people like John and me in the future, if anybody, please, on my knees, just record those 3 things together: your car, your miles, and the actual fuel that you use, whether that's petrol, diesel, electricity. Just insist that whoever has a vehicle, and I'm preaching to myself as well, because at the moment we found yesterday that we're actually not doing in our own business. So those 3 things, that's all you need: vehicle, miles, and liters of fuel associated with those miles. All of your transport, you can all of a sudden start managing your transport much better, and you'll get control over it, and all this route planning and all these other clever things you can get involved. That's fantastic. But if you're not recording those 3 things together, start doing them now.
Well said, because ultimately that's down to the efficiency of your vehicle and the efficiency of how you're driving. Well said. Let's move on to the next question. Right. What would make your energy efficiency journey easier? Okay, this is interesting. Actually, the biggest slice of the pie here is the green one, is having the easier audit tools.
Oh, that's interesting,
isn't it? Okay, let's put it to the panel. Your thoughts on the breakdown between these responses?
I think from looking at that green part of the pie, I think there's a lot of easy to use tools out there, but perhaps they're not being effectively publicized and talked about more. And perhaps this is something that we need to talk about, what's out there, whether it is consultants on site, whether it is a software platform, whether it is collecting that data in a more efficient way. And I think that people need to know about them, and we need to be educating more on what is out there to help and support.
I think that many people actually have those tools already and they don't even know it. For instance, your electricity bill or your gas bill, you just need to know how. What we find is we spend a lot of time educating our clients on how to read an electricity bill, because in an attempt to become more transparent, we've actually sometimes overcomplicated something that doesn't necessarily need it. So the billing systems are very transparent, but they can be confusing. So we have a little trick. What we do is we take your total consumption in kilowatt hours and your total before VAT amount, and you divide the one by the other, and you immediately know how much you're paying per kilowatt hour. It's called the average energy rate. And that electricity bill, if you just keep track of your month, your electricity and your cost, your kilowatt hours or your gas or whatever. That's already a tool that you've got. Also, if you've got half hourly meters, you can do the same, and there are ways of getting that sort of data. Just ask your utility or whoever's doing that work for you to get the same sort of information, and you start putting that into a spreadsheet sheet somewhere. Also, Elisa alluded to it earlier on. If you want to know, to drill down into what your energy, where you're spending energy, put these little loggers onto your HVAC system or onto your lighting systems or whatever it is. So these little loggers can actually start tracking your energy that you're getting, that you're using, and that those tools, those are sort of in-house tools that you own, and you don't rely on somebody else's website to be able to do that. So those tools are already available. They take a bit of coordination and maybe a little bit of research. And YouTube's a great place to find these things. So those tools are already available for you, and you can put them in one place in an Excel spreadsheet. Alternatively, there are the calculators and that sort of thing, but they don't always give you an exact answer that applies exactly to your organization, although they'll give you a pretty good idea. So, but yes, they should be more available.
Great. Any more comments on what's in that final pie chart there? Anything grab your eye there, John?
Well, yeah, easy to use all the tools. But yeah, for us with ESOS, it sort of goes back to one of Roger's points. Really, it's getting. We've often found that one of the biggest pains for us being ESOS auditors, energy auditors, is that getting data from a customer is always quite hard. But I think, like Roger says, they should have all this data, and so it's a case of making best use of what they've already got. You know, they're obviously paying for their energy, so within their finance system they will have an energy breakdown, they will have the energy bills, and if they've got half hourly data, then there's obviously a lot of good stuff there that you can then sort of analyze your data on a half hourly basis and see where it's being used and see if there's any strange spikes. So there's lots of good things there. What else? Is there more cash to fund? It's you kind of only need that really if you're going for things with a longer payback. Like I said, there's things like light bulbs will typically pay for themselves within a year. It's not like Roger has pointed out, it could only be 5-10% of your whole energy usage, so it's not the biggest thing. Some things are cost free though, so you know, I banged on earlier about turning down heating controls.
About funding from banks, they're going to want to know that you're having more sustainable practices and that you are logging what you've done, even if you aren't good right now. I guess that all kind of slots together there, Lisa.
Yes, if you, I've spoken to a number of banks recently, and if you look at the changes that they're making within their underwriting team right now, they are putting green policies in there. They are putting requirements in there, which one does certainly help the bid to get funding for green initiatives. But overall, businesses are required to be more green. So it is an option there. There are some banks as well that will offer better rates if it is for a green initiative. So if it is for solar or wind or heat pumps, there are those options there.
Cool. That's great. Actually, I'm going to go back on a question that we've had actually, which is about insurance. Building insurance, does that get affected by putting your solar array on your roof? I think any of you could answer this one. Who wants to say something?
I don't think I will have all of the answers, unfortunately, but we would recommend that if you are having a solar array, then you are having it insured, because obviously and there shouldn't be, but if there are any issues, then you should be informing your insurance company that you are installing solar. How that changes in terms of an increase in costs, unfortunately, I don't know, but I'm assuming it will increase the cost of the overall premium.
Do we have any more experience of that?
I suppose from a domestic point of view, we've obviously put solar on our house a couple of years ago, wasn't it? And thinking about buying insurance, I can't ever remember seeing a question on the insurance, when you're filling in compare the meerkats or whatever, about whether you got solar panels on your roof. So certainly from a domestic point of view, I've never seen impact from personal use and domestic point of view. I've never seen impact insurance or seen that question from an insurance company.
We also work with NFU Mutual. They're one of our sort of sister organizations. And when we did some solar work for them on the actual building in Stratford, and they were asking questions like, and this is not an answer, but this is the questions they were asking. They were saying, how does this impact the structural integrity of the building? And they were also asking about wind wind impact, and that sort of how are the, so if you're going to be installing solar, I would imagine more sort of commercially, you've got to make sure that and I think the solar suppliers should have this. They should know about this kind of thing, and they will be able to tell you this has got a certain wind whatever impact thing, and also how it affects the integrity of your roof. I don't think if they do a quick inspection on the roof, and if the roof is, say, asbestos or the rafters are not looking so good, then they will sort of advise that you fix that first. So that's all I can say.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm just thinking whether, gosh, I can't actually remember with the our solar installation, even if building standards need to look at anything or sign anything off. I do recall getting quite a number of certifications and obviously seeing all the structural calcs against it. That obviously going to a really reputable solar installer who does all that, I wouldn't expect any of them to be able to trade if they didn't have that. But making sure you're getting all those certifications, because you shouldn't be reliant on the insurance to bail you out. It should be done right in the first place.
Yeah, you get all the certificates at the end when you've had these solar put on, so it sort of covers that, so that there shouldn't be any structural issues. Yeah.
Great. I'm looking at Lucy's comment here. I have to admit, I think we might have moved on a little on contextually there. I'm going to read it out. Ours are becoming increasingly interested in our systems, and we're having to provide lots of data and evidence of maintenance. Some good guidance out there. We'll see if I can share with this chat. Okay, great. Okay, this is it is about the solar PV. So do go check that out. That's on the chat link at the moment. I think that brings us to the end of our surveys. Thank you so much. Move on. Before we close today, we have our next session coming up in July is a live session at the fabulous University of Winchester. And this is on renewable energy and low carbon technology. So this is kind of a nice segue into it, isn't it? We are going to confirm the date there. As I say, we will be live in Winchester. Some fabulous work there that Matt Jane, if you know him, he's the facilities management over at the university. He's got some fabulous stuff he's set up with air source heat pumps, etc. So please come and join us for that. If you want some more SBN content right now, of course, do visit our online SBN video library. It's completely free to use. You can grab the QR code there. We'll post the link in the chat, easy to remember. So this particular video will be there in the next couple of days. We cover a whole range of subjects. If you want to know about supply chain carbon footprinting, climate change, target setting, it's all there. So please do go check it out for us. I'd like to say a big thank you to our presenters, Lisa and Zoe, today for your amazing work, and to John and Roger for joining us for the panel discussion, and to you actually for your excellent questions. Only remains also to say thank you to the three councils who support these sessions, being Rushmore, Hart and Basingstoke and Deane. Thank you guys. I hope you've enjoyed the session, and we look forward to seeing you on the next SBN. Thank you very much and have a lovely weekend.